Hello, hi, and welcome. If you're new here, my name is Sarah, and this is Wicked Reading. So I don't know if you guys have noticed or not, but I have not been doing monthly wrap-ups. Honestly, for this year, I just really didn't want to break things down monthly. The idea of monthly wrap-ups was kind of stressing me out once in a while last year because honestly, I'm a bit of a slower reader, and especially this year was a very slow start to my reading of 2025. So I just felt like I was putting a lot of pressure on myself to be able to say, I read 12 books this month. I read blah, blah, blah books. The quantity of books, breaking it down monthly, was stressing me out. So this year I decided that I will still do some wrap-ups, but they're going to be pretty rapid wrap-ups, and I'm going to do them quarterly. And it's just puts a little bit less pressure on me in terms of like quantity. While I will go over numbers and stuff, I'm just like not as stressed about it this year. And along with my series of reading down my physical TBRs, a lot of these books will have been featured in vlogs, if not honestly most of them, especially moving forward. This particular one, I didn't vlog a lot of the beginning of my reading year this year, so there's quite a few books on this video that have not been featured in a vlog, but moving forward, most of the books I'm reading are going to be in vlogs. So I'm going to be keeping these reviews very, very limited, quick to the point, but if you want to see more of my thoughts, more of my in-depth thoughts without spoilers, of course, I will be mentioning which vlogs those are in, so you can check those out and seek those out specifically. But I will also go over quarterly stats just because I'm a stats girly. I love stats. I love looking at numbers. Even though I'm not going to stress about the numbers, I do like to look at them still, okay? So I will also be including some quarterly statistics within my quarterly wrap-ups. So let's just jump right in because I have quite a few books to talk about. So going through my stats, I just keep my stats through Storygraph. Love the app. I pretty much only use my Goodreads at the moment for my shelf because I do find that the Goodreads, making your own shelves, is a little bit easier to navigate for me on the app, and I have my physical TBR shelf on Goodreads already. So I'm pretty much just using that to keep track of my physical TBR. I still put my star ratings up on Goodreads, but I don't update it in real time. So I never actually even have a currently reading thing because I like to keep it a surprise for the vlogs, okay? All I'm trying to say is all my stats are on Storygraph. Anyways, so I have officially read 18 books as of today. I will only be talking about 17 of those books listed, and then I also have 3 DNFs I will talk about. But that equated to 6,574 pages. My mood chart is mostly dark, emotional, mysterious, little bit tense, and then it kind of goes down from there, which is all very consistent with my last year of reading as well. Top genre, of course, is horror, followed by fantasy. And then we have some other genres that are kind of intermixed within that. So some are also listed under thriller, literary, LGBTQIA+. I have read a couple of YA books, and you can see the rest of the list from there. I have mostly been reading physically with my eyeballs, 67% of the books that I've read. That being 12 of the books I've read fully physically. The DNFs are a mixed bag, so I'll talk about those when I get to those. And then a third of the books that I've read and finished so far this year were through audiobooks, so that was 6 books. My average rating is 3.75 so far, which is pretty good. I wanted to be even higher, honestly, but that's really good, especially compared to last year. And I've only had 1 2-star book, a couple of 2.5 stars, but everything else has been 3-star or above. Most of my ratings have been 4-star ratings, so I feel like I'm having a really good reading year so far. It feels better, even though like my quantity's lower and stuff, it feels better. I've already had 3 5-stars, and I've definitely increased my DNFing this year, so I think that that's helping as well. So it just feels like a good reading year so far. But let's talk about the books. So I am going to talk about the books in the order of which I read them. It's just easier for me to organize that way. So the very first book that I read in 2025 was Near the Bone by Christina Henry. I actually listened to this on audiobook. This is the only book in this video that I didn't already own on my physical TBR. I ended up getting this through my Libby app, through my library on the audiobook. So I'm actually going to read the synopsis for this one because I went in blind for the most part, other than knowing it was like a wintry book and I thought it had a monster in it. But I'm going to read the synopsis because I don't want to give anything away. So it says, Maddie can't remember a time before she and William lived alone on a mountain together. She must never make him upset. But when Maddie discovers the mutilated body of a fox in the woods, she realizes that they're not alone after all. There's something in the woods, something that makes strange cries in the night, something with sharp teeth and claws. When three strangers appear on the mountaintop looking for the creature in the woods, Maddie knows their presence will anger William. Terrible things happen when William is angry. So I was really excited and really optimistic going into this audiobook. It's one of those books that I feel like is on everybody's list to read specifically during winter. If you're looking for like winter horror recommendations, I feel like I see this one everywhere. And I had wanted to read it the previous winter, didn't get to it. So it was a long time coming, and unfortunately this felt extremely flat for me. So while it is a creature feature, like there is a monster, it's really more of a symbolic purpose. Like there is a legit monster, but it's a little bit more symbolic, and I don't know, I just felt like everything was so on the nose. The symbolism of why the monster was in there, and then the journey of our main character Maddie. I just saw a lot of stuff coming, and I usually don't really care about that, but it just felt like I was waiting for her to figure stuff out a lot of the time, and I figured stuff out very early on in the book. And I also just like didn't resonate with the theme of the story in general, and it felt very lackluster. It didn't feel like it was doing anything unique, and it just felt very mediocre to me. And as time has gone on, I can safely say that it has not left an impression on me, and it really hasn't stood out as anything special. So I ended up giving it 2.5 stars because I just didn't really feel much toward it. I didn't hate the book, but I really didn't like it either. It just didn't really spark much at all in me. So I gave it 2.5 stars. It really just wasn't the type of book I like. The themes were very obvious and done very cliche. Symbols were very obvious and done very cliche. So this just really didn't do anything for me. After that, I still wanted to try to find some more winter horror to read. So I decided to go with Boys in the Valley by Philip Fracassi. I had heard such wonderful raving reviews about this book going into it. In this book, we are following an orphanage of all of these young boys between, I don't know, ages like 5 to 15 or something like that, maybe even a little bit older, maybe until they're 17. But it's this orphanage that keeps all these orphaned boys, and it is run by a priest. And one day a stranger comes by the orphanage, and his body is very badly wounded. He has occult symbols in his flesh, and the priest attempt an exorcism, and after that things are just not right, and a lot of tension is building up within the boys, and some of the boys are acting very different. Overall, I did really enjoy this book. I really liked the atmosphere. It's a little bit more of a historical set. I forget what time period we're in. Early 12th century. It definitely has the vibes of more kind of like Lord of the Flies. And yeah, I enjoyed a lot of the imagery. I enjoyed our characters. While there are a lot of boys and a lot of characters in this story, enough of them stood out and were individualized enough and deep enough where I did care a lot about a few of the characters. So I thought that the characters were done really well. We do jump between POVs, and I enjoyed that. We even jump narrative style. So some of the POVs are in first person. Our main character that we are following, his chapters are in first person, and then the other chapters are all in third person, but we do jump around a bit. And in a situation like this with so many people involved, I actually really enjoy that, and being able to see what's going on in all these different areas of the orphanage, for example, at the same time, and kind of how one event in one room is translating into an experience in another room, that kind of situation. So I enjoyed the formatting of the story, the approach of the story. I enjoyed the writing of the story and the atmosphere and the characters. So I had a really good time with it. There's just something holding me back from loving it as much as everybody else seemed to love it. So I did end up giving it 4 stars, but I really can't tell you why. It was just kind of a feeling. I enjoyed the way the story ended. It even actually had me tear up a little bit at the end. The one character's full character arc I feel like was very impactful, so I enjoyed that. And yeah, I had a really, really good time with this, but it just like didn't feel like a 5-star at the same time. But I do highly recommend it, especially if you're into kind of religious possession-esque horror. The imagery was done really well. It does get quite brutal and quite gruesome in some parts. Like the body horror does not really hold back sometimes. And some of the things that happened in this book, like I can still vividly imagine them as if I had just read this. So if that tells you anything, the imagery in this book does stand out pretty well. So yeah, that was Boys in the Valley. After that, I read Where the Dark Stands Still by A.B. Poranik, I want to say. Poranik, I'm not totally sure how to say this last name. This is a Polish, Slovenian mythology inspired fantasy, and we follow our main character who has a little bit of magic in her, but it is deemed very inappropriate, and magic is not seen in a positive light in her village. So she decides to go into the forest surrounding her village, and this forest is known to have a bunch of magical things and beings in it. But she wants to go to this forest because she's looking for this particular flower, I believe it is. And if you find the flower, you get a wish, and she wants to wish away her magic. So that ends up bringing our character to the forest, where she ends up making contact with the Leshy and ends up making a bargain with him where she needs to stay in the woods with him for a year and pretty much be his like assistant slash housekeeper for a year, and then he's gonna grant her this wish. So that's pretty much where the story takes off. I had a really fun time with this as well. I enjoyed the creatures, the Slovenian mythology. I had a really fun time learning about throughout the story. There's just something about Slovenian and Polish mythology and their creatures that I just am so gravitated towards. Especially like I think of The Witcher and stuff like that. I love the creatures of those worlds so much. So I had a really fun time with how much we were getting of that in the story. There is also this element of found family, which I found to be really charming and really sweet, and I liked that. I really enjoyed our main character. I will say there's like a subplot romance that I could have done without. I didn't hate it, but honestly, I feel like it should have just been a friendship, and I would have liked it a lot more if it were just purely found family and friendship. Like, we don't need romance in everything, okay? And I know that that's probably a hot take, but it felt a little unnecessary to me. So I did end up giving it a 4.5 stars, mostly just because that subplot romance did pretty much nothing for me, and I just felt like it would have been better without it, because it just felt underdone. It just felt like it was put in there because I feel like so many people like subplot romances now. So I feel like it was just kind of pushed into the story, but it really didn't feel very convincing, I guess, to me at the same time. It definitely delivered the cozy cottage, foresty, woodsy atmosphere that I thought that it would. So I think that this would make a really good either like spring, maybe summer, maybe autumn type of read, but it definitely has those types of vibes, and I enjoyed it, and I really enjoyed our main character. Next is the first book I decided to DNF. I had started the audiobook, and that is A Fragile Enchantment by Allison Saft. In the story, we are following, let me see if I can remember, our main character, and she is a little bit magic, and it's set in like Victorian-esque society, and she is hired to become the tailor for the prince and for the royal family pretty much, but mostly the prince. And what she does with her magic is kind of engrave it into the clothes that she makes. She imbues people's clothes with an emotion or a feeling that they can then manifest and feel when they are wearing her garments, which sounds really cool and interesting, but honestly, I was damn near bored to tears by this book. I don't remember exactly the details of the story, but I think that when the people are magic, they're kind of seen down on, and I don't believe that magic is like fully outlawed or anything like that, but it's not encouraged. So it has the makings of kind of like classism theme going on, but it just felt like no stakes were being made at the same time. Like there were no high stakes, it felt like, for a character at really any point, and just nothing was building. And of course there's a subplot romance. Honestly, I don't know how much of subplot it is because this is more so fantasy romance, and I was not invested in that, and I don't know, I just felt like nothing for this book. I didn't really care about the character. There were some cool ideas in this book, but just nothing was building for me. I was not latching on to anything at all. So my time limit for my audiobook, because I got it through my Libby app, was expired. And so the loan got returned and I just didn't even care. I realized I didn't care what happened next. I didn't care what happened with the rest of the story because I made it very far into this book. I don't remember quite how much, but I think I was like 50% of the way into this book and it just felt like it was going nowhere. So I just kind of gave it up because yeah, I was not invested. So this is a YA as well. I feel like it kind of wanted to be Half a Soul by, I believe, Olivia Atwater. And I feel like if you want all the vibes that I talked about, but want it done better, to read Half a Soul. I think that these two are quite comparable, but Half a Soul is like way better. Just comparable in terms of like attempted atmosphere and stuff like that. Yeah, DNF'd this. I don't care what happened with the rest of the story. I haven't even thought about it since. Okay, so now we're getting into books that were all featured in vlogs, so these reviews are going to be very rapid, and I will link all the vlogs down below, so if you want to hear more thoughts about them, spoiler free of course, you can check out those vlogs to get a more in-depth review on them. So next we have The Queen by Nick Cutter. In this book, we are following our main character, Margaret, and she wakes up one day, opens her front door, and there's a iPhone on the ground, and it has text from her best friend, which is weird because her best friend's been missing, but she's getting these texts from her, and it kind of turns into her just doing what her friend is telling her to do, going to places that her friend is telling her to go, and trying to figure out the mystery of why her friend went missing and where she's at now and what's going on now and why is she messaging her. So it kind of becomes a mystery-esque following breadcrumbs type of stories. So I have really loved Nick Cutter in the past, and I have also really disliked Nick Cutter books in the past. The Troop, I loved. I gave it 5 stars. The Deep, I hated. I gave it 2 stars. Arguably it's 1 star, but I gave it 2 stars. This stood right in the middle for me. I gave this 3 stars. I think that it had a lot of interesting elements in it, but for whatever reason, the way everything came together was very clunky to me, and it just didn't flow in my head. The plot points weren't really flowing. There were a lot of moments that felt very unnecessary and overwritten, and some of it read a little bit cringy because it is very modern day and we are following high schoolers and they very much talk like it and it just read very cringy sometimes, and I just wanted different POVs and I wanted attention on different things than what I got from this book. But it was a very even split of stuff that I liked. There were a lot of elements I liked. There was this element of almost like a mad scientist that I thought was really cool. There's a lot of bug stuff that goes on in this book that I thought was really cool. But yeah, just something about the way that it was all put together didn't feel good and didn't feel like it flowed well. And it was just kind of a bummer because honestly, the prologue of this book, immediately, I was so excited with just the prologue of this book, but it took so long for the story to get back to where the prologue was that it just, yeah, felt a little dragged. So I gave it 3 stars. It was fine. I'm not keeping it in my collection, but yeah, not my favorite Nick Cutter, but not my least favorite Nick Cutter either. After that, I read Parasite by Myra Grant. This is a sci-fi book where we are pretty much in the modern world. I mean, it's like 2027, so like near distant future. And there has been this medical miracle invented where people will be injected with a parasite that will perform medical miracles pretty much. It gets rid of autoimmune diseases and chronic diseases. If you're somebody who takes medicine, the parasite will actually just release your medication to you and you just have to do nothing. You do nothing and you just have this implanted in your intestines and it takes care of all of the other stuff. In this book, we are following our main character who was one of the earliest recipients of said tapeworm, and her story is interesting and her integration into the story is interesting because why she matters so much is that she was in a horrific car accident that she should have died from, but she didn't. And they think it might have had to do with her parasite. And because of this, she is now heavily studied and monitored by the company that created this parasite. But the thing is, she does not remember her life at all before the car accident. So she's essentially a completely new person, and it does lead to some really interesting themes and conversations and conflicts, I guess, for our character and her pre and post accident life and what that means and how that changes her relationships with her family around her and all of these other people that knew her previous to her accident. It adds a really cool level of that. Now, at the same time, she ends up just kind of getting roped into a lot of things because she was just in the wrong place, wrong time. She ends up witnessing some people on the street act very bizarrely, and it turns out that they had a parasite in them. So then it becomes a mystery of what's going on with people who had the parasite, what's it changing about people, yada yada yada. So I really enjoyed the story. I really enjoyed the voiceover main character. She is admittedly a very boring main character that just happens to be at the center of a lot of stuff going on around her, but I found her to be very charming. And I think that she was neurodivergent coded. It just felt like it for me. And I related to a lot of her social awkwardness at times and stuff like that. And the whole thing with the parasite and the medical stuff going on, I found to be very interesting. Despite how chunky it is, it read really fast for me. I was really engaged the whole time. I do think it does lean a little bit more into character. There's a lot of plot going on, but I do think you have to like the character to want to stick it out for the book. And again, I enjoyed following the characters, so I had a fun time with it. I do think if you like Girl with All the Gifts by M.R. Carey, you would like this one, or vice versa. I think that those are kind of comparable. They still very much have different things going on, but I feel like the same type of person, the same type of reader might like both of them, but it is still a very different story at the end of the day. But I had a fun time. I gave it 4 stars. I'm really excited to check out the rest of the series because it is a completed trilogy, so I'm excited to get to the second one. After that, I listened to the audiobook for Through the Midnight Door by Katrina Monroe. In this book, we are following 3 sisters who went to an abandoned house when they were young, and they each went into individual rooms of this house, and various things happened to them in those rooms. And you don't know what. They don't even really remember what, but there's just bad vibes around what had happened. Then the book flash forwards to them being adults, and one of the sisters actually unalives herself in said abandoned house, and it kind of delves into and splits off into 2 mysteries. So we follow the current time where the sister has unalived herself, and the 2 remaining sisters trying to figure out exactly why, what happened, and bringing up kind of the old trauma surrounding the house when they were little. And then we also get another timeline of the sister who did unalive herself previous to her doing so, and the buildup of that and like her actions and what she was doing leading up to her doing what she did. And then there's like a third kind of mystery as well. But yeah, anyway, I found this book so incredibly mediocre, every which way around. The writing was mediocre. The themes are themes that are done so often, and the book did nothing special with them. So it just felt very lame. The symbolism of this book, again, very obvious, very mediocre. Just nothing about this was very unique, and I just didn't really like a lot of the things that it ended up doing. It wasn't horrible, but it just like was not good, and overall just extremely mediocre. That is the #1 word I would use for this book, mediocre. So I gave it 2.5 stars. I wouldn't go out of my way to read it, but if you own it, maybe give it a go, but just like don't expect anything crazy or unique. And if you just want to read a book, sure, pick it up, but I don't necessarily recommend it unless you just already happen to own it. The next 4 books are part of my episode 1 of reading down my physical TBR, and the first book is The Helm of Midnight by Marina Lofstetter. I loved this so much. I had so much fun with this book. I have been putting this book off forever, you guys. I got it in 2023, and I finally read it for episode 1. Loved it. I gave it 5 stars. This is such a unique fantasy. The back describes it as Hannibal meets Mistborn. While I don't really know the details of Mistborn, I feel like that's a really good comparison. And pretty much in this world, they have these death masks. And some of these death masks are imbued with people's abilities, as in like what they're very knowledgeable on. Like if someone was really good at making potions or something, it's imbued with the knowledge that that person had. Or someone's like really good ability to, I don't know, bladesmith or something like that. And so when you put the mask on, you yourself have that ability or that knowledge while you wear the mask. The book opens up with a heist that is done, and in the midst of this heist, a mask is stolen that had belonged to a serial killer who had done some pretty gruesome stuff. So it's very concerning that the mask is missing because the killings have started to happen again. We end up following 3 different characters in this book. One of them is called the Regulator. So it's a person who is supposed to oversee all this magical stuff, and they were present at the time of the heist. So we're following them trying to figure out the heist, who organized it, what happened, why they took what they took. And then we follow 2 other characters that are also kind of involved in this situation, but we're following their POVs from different timelines. I'm just gonna leave it at that because I thought it was really fun to try to figure out how they were all linked and what exactly some of their purposes were and what was going on with their POVs. So I'm just gonna leave it at that. I ended up really enjoying this. It had so many elements I liked. I loved the magic system. The magic system is extremely intricate, very unique, very cool, and it tied in a lot of medicinal stuff, a lot of medicine stuff, as well as like alchemy, things like that. And then there is also this side element, not even side element because it's a pretty big deal, but in this world, there's all these gods. So there's like cult things going on, there's medicinal things going on, there's this mystery going on, there's magic stuff happening. And I just found that I really, really loved all the elements. And I felt like all of the elements were woven very, very well into each other. And while the world was very intricate, it was given in just such a good way. It never felt info dumpy. It felt a little confusing for a little bit, but I definitely was eventually very integrated into the story and very pulled in. So loved this one, had a great time, highly recommend it. So glad I finally read it. This was my first 5-star of the year. After that, I listened to the audiobook of How to Sell a Haunted House by Grady Hendrix. This book, we follow our main character and her parents very suddenly and very unexpectedly pass. And because of this, she ends up having to go back home and deal with their house that they left behind along with her brother. And they had a very tumultuous relationship. And also, her mom had like a thing for puppets and dolls. So the house is full of puppets and dolls, and we'll leave it at that. I was very pleasantly surprised by this book. I honestly went in thinking I wasn't gonna really like it, that it was gonna be maybe a 3-star. I listened to the audiobook. I ended up giving this 4 stars. I was so pleasantly surprised. I thought that our main character, the depth of her character and the depth of some of the themes that we were getting was so well done and so well written. But this book also has a lot of comedic relief in it, so it's a little bit more of like a comedy horror, I guess, and I felt like it was just woven together so well, and the impact of some of the more heart-wrenching writing, and then to have moments of me actually laughing out loud, it was just, for me, done very well, and the balance of that comedy and deeper discussion was really, really good, and it just worked so well for me. There's some discussion on motherhood, a lot of discussion on family dynamics in general, sister-brother relationships, the complexities that can happen with that, mother-daughter relationships, and extended family, and then also at the core of it, grief, because we're dealing with lost parents, and there's a lot of very raw yet clerical moments that people kind of forget about with death. When somebody dies, you have to fill out a lot of paperwork. You have to like call this office and organize this, and it's a lot more clerical and a lot more secretarial than people go in expecting. And this kind of shed a little bit of a light on that, and I enjoyed that because yeah, death isn't just being able to grieve, but it's also having to deal with paperwork and taxes and what people leave behind and all of this. But yeah, and then there's like a mystery too, and I like the way that the book ended. It was just a really entertaining time, and I had a good time listening to it. So I do recommend, if you want to read this book, I think that the audiobook is the way to go because it just was a really fun, entertaining time at the end of the day. And yeah, enjoyed it, 4 stars. Then we have Monstrilio by Gerardo Samano Cordova. So this was pretty much sold to me and understood by me as being a grief literary horror book. We pretty much follow a set of parents who have lost their son, and in her grief, the mother decides to take a piece of the son's lung, and she decides to feed said piece of lung, and it pretty much turns into a little creature thing called Monstrilio. So I had this on like a 5-star prediction. Everybody told me that I would love this, and unfortunately I just didn't really love it. So the book is split up into 4 sections. One, we follow the mother. One, we follow a family friend. The other one, we follow the father. And the last one, we follow Monstrilio. And I really enjoyed the beginning. I think that the beginning was really interesting and very, very grief heavy, as I expected. And I enjoyed following the mother's POV for most of the time. But then I didn't really like nor understand why we ended up following the POV of the family friend. The POV of the father didn't really do too much for me either. There were a couple of moments in there I liked, and then the last POV I really enjoyed. So I really liked the beginning of the story and the end of the story, but this book was so vastly different than what I expected. I wouldn't even personally put this under horror. I think it's more of a genre blend with literary, magical surrealism, and like folk, with like a tiny dash of horror, but like also not really. Just because a book has like a tiny bit of gore, I don't think that that makes it a horror book. And also the themes of this book, it wasn't just grief. It was very grief heavy in the beginning again, and there was this undercurrent of grief throughout the whole thing, but it ends up branching into themes of sexual identity, mother-daughter relationships, kind of, trauma we hold on to, self-identity, self-acceptance. And I really enjoyed the self-acceptance aspects to this book in particular, but some of those other things I just didn't latch on to. I think that this book had just way too much going on, where I don't feel like it leaned into anything enough for me personally. And it was a lot more sexually explicit than I expected. So that threw me off quite a bit. It is a very queer book, which is nice, but yeah, it just did a lot more than what I wanted it to, and it just didn't do anything I wanted it to particularly well for me, like in my opinion and in my experience. Like the writing was fine, but the way people talk about this, I expected the writing to be super purple prose, very lyrical, but it has a very subtle thing going on with it that, I don't know. I just didn't really latch onto any particular element of this book, but I did like the beginning and I did like the end, particularly the last like 30-ish pages. Loved. Honestly, the last POV would have been like just that, I would have loved. But yeah, there was just a little too much in between that I didn't care about, and it took me quite a while to finish this book, despite it being easily a quick read. But I didn't hate it, and I do think it's very unique, and I respect it for what it is, and I gave it 3.5 stars, but it was just very disappointing for me because I had expected it to be 5 stars and really blow me out of the water. It was just a harder fall for me. Just go into it with better expectations than I did. Next is Ghost Eaters by Clay McLeod Chapman. In this book, we are following a group of 4 friends, 2 of the people of which are kind of like on again, off again, so they have like deeper feelings for each other, but it's like this group of 4 friends, and one of them in particular is dealing with addiction, and he does eventually OD, and in the midst of this, they find out about a drug called Ghost, and if you take this drug, you can see ghosts. So the main character we are following, she is grieving and desperate enough that she wants to start taking this drug in order to try to reach him again, and it becomes her journey of that. And I loved this book. This was a 5-star book for me. I just thought that the theme and the conversation of addiction was done so well. I loved the way that this book was formatted and structured. I really loved our main character. I loved her voice, and the way the realistic addiction was morphed with this kind of supernatural-esque aspect. I thought was done really well and very interesting. And some of the imagery in this book was actually genuinely creepy and off-putting to me. I feel like the horror components and the body horror of this book were done really, really well. I just really enjoyed the writing. I loved the characters, the journey she goes on. I was just really, really very happy with the way that this book was done. There is a moment in this book too that feels so fever dream feeling, so bizarre, so weird, and I can see why people might have not liked that particular aspect, but I loved it. I thought it just fit with what our character was going through, and for her, that was kind of like her rock bottom moment, and it follows very much the journey of addiction. And I don't know, I thought that this book was so good. I loved it. 5 stars. Highly recommend it if you want a book that does addiction well and also ties in horror and supernatural stuff. And then next group of 4 books from episode 2 of Reading Down My Bookshelves. The first one is Stone Blind by Natalie Haynes. This is pitched as and described as a retelling of Medusa and Medusa's story. I will say immediately, Medusa is in the story. She is the cover of the book, but she only makes up maybe 25 to a third of the book. We follow so many more characters, particularly goddesses and mortal women of Greek mythology. So this is better pitched as just kind of an overall feminist retelling of all of these Greek women and people in Greek mythology, how their stories are interwoven. And I feel like it's just more so a culmination and a conglomerate of how these women's femininity and strength and power manifests in various ways. We have a lot of characters whose purpose of this book seems to focus around the idea of motherhood or even just like our nurturing abilities. There are moments that highlight how monstrous men can sometimes form our stories. I don't know, there's just a lot going on in this book. A lot of themes, a lot of characters, a lot of other things other than just what Medusa and what Medusa stood for. But it also does have Medusa in it and her story as well. But I feel like this is just a really, really good overview of Greek mythology if you want to get into Greek mythology and Greek mythology retellings that kind of focus on some of the women and the goddesses and all of that in the story, because you get enough of them where you understand everybody's relationships and how these characters are interwoven with each other's stories. But it's not like a super deep dive of anyone in particular either. So I just found it to be a really, really great overarching story of all of that. So it's not super, super deep in terms of like a specific character study like I expected it to be, but I still found myself getting so much out of the story. I have so many tabs in this book, and if you watch the vlog, I totally gush over a particular part of this book, and I don't know, I thought it was very, very good. I think it was well written. There was a lot of unique aspects to the story that I didn't expect, and I was pleasantly surprised because I haven't heard anybody talk about this, but really enjoyed it, had a good time. I was nervous going into it because I always get nervous about Greek mythology, but I felt that this one was very, very approachable and very easily understood. So highly recommend. I gave it 4.5 stars. Next one I'm going to keep brief because I have very unpopular opinion on, and that is A Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson. So this is a story where we are following one of Dracula's wives as she is writing him letters, pretty much explaining to him her perspective on what they went through together, their journey, and the abuse that he put her through. That said, she never actually says Dracula, but we just know because of context clues. But she even says something along the lines of, I'm not even going to name you because you don't deserve your name, everything you've taken from me, yada yada. Very, very powerful message on itself. But I just did not like the writing of this. I did not like the writing. It felt extremely cliche to me. It felt very forced. It felt very surface level. It felt very Tumblr post. Felt like it was trying to be deeper than it was. And I also was not interested in the plot. It was just a little too fast-paced for me because she's just recounting stuff. So it was very surface level, fast-paced plot. And I also just didn't feel attached to the characters, and I didn't feel like I really understood the characters, except our main character. I mean, we understand her the most because we're getting her POV, most of the time, but everything's through her lens and through her filter. So it just, I don't know. I didn't connect to anybody in particular. I don't know if it's because of the formatting style, because it's like this epistolary take, and that's not something I read all the time. I just personally felt very detached from the story. So it just didn't really do for me what it does for a lot of other people. I don't think it was horrible. I think it was fine, but it just was not what I expected it to be. And I went in expecting this to be a 5-star. So yeah, I was really disappointed by this. But that's a very, very unpopular opinion, but I gave it 3 stars. Next is another unpopular opinion because I DNF'd The Tainted Cup by Robert Bennett Jackson. So in the vlog, I go very much into why I DNF'd this. I made it 100 pages in, but at the end of the day, to boil it down, I just could not stand the main characters at all. They were so unbearably annoying to me for 2 vastly different reasons. And I didn't like the writing style. I didn't like the choice in having our character be so passive, and the world felt so info dumpy. Like the exposition of the world felt so info dumpy. I could not stand the character dialogue, and I just knew I was going to progressively dislike this book more and more if I continued on with it. While it had some interesting elements going on with the world, with this idea of leviathans and these mutated people with abilities, it had a cool element and a cool idea, but I could not get past the characters or the writing style, so I DNF'd it. But it wasn't all bad news, because as soon as I DNF'd that, I ended up finding a 5-star book, and that was New Animal by Ella Baxter. I loved this book so much. This is a very character-driven story, a very character journey-esque story, where we are following our main character, Amelia, who is the mortuary makeup artist. So she does the makeup on dead bodies. So she has this very interesting relationship with bodies, which becomes a main theme of the story. But one day her mother very suddenly and unexpectedly passes away, and she goes on a grief journey with that. And in the midst of her grieving journey, she also stumbles into the BDSM community and her clumsy, awkward experiences with that. And I don't know, I just really fell in love with the story. I loved the writing of this book. The writing is so incredibly unique, and I just found it to be so beautiful and just so well done. And this book is so hard for me to describe what I loved about it. Even in the vlog, I'm kind of a little bit of a blubbering mess, but it just hit me so viscerally, and I just felt so many things for myself come out of this book, like perspective-wise, and it just really hit me in the gut for so many different reasons. There's this underlying theme in this book that I thought was just so beautifully done when it comes to bodies and how we think about bodies and what we do with our bodies and what our bodies mean to us. And then how we think of ourselves as like ourselves in our head, our perceptions, our thoughts and our beliefs, and then how our bodies can sometimes be separate from that, and we can separate the two even though we are one being and we should be connected. But it's interesting, and it kind of just follows our character as she's grappling with wanting to do things to her body, kind of to separate herself from her emotional state, and she doesn't know how to deal with her emotional state, and it just becomes her finally connecting these two back together, but in such a subtle way, because you can just read this book and not get anything from it. But this book made me feel so many things, and I got so much out of the book from between the words, from between the text, and it just was very eye-opening to me in such a nonchalant way. Like, I just did not expect to get so much out of this book as I did, but I just thought it was so beautifully done. But there are definitely a lot of trigger warnings for this book. It has a lot of dark topics, a lot of dark things are brought up, and there's a lot of stuff that's really not off the table. So go in knowing that there's a lot of dark stuff going on in this book. But overall, this book was just such an experience for me, and I just loved it, and it's just something I will never be able to explain quite why or quite how much this book affected me, but I felt this on such a personal level, and I loved it. Okay, I loved it. But it is very character driven, very theme driven, very kind of personal experience driven. So not everyone's going to connect with it the way I did, but this was a 6-star read for me, honestly. My favorite book of the year so far. Moving into the last stack of 4 books from episode 3 of reading down my TBR. So first we have Victorian Psycho by Virginia Fido. This is a little short book about a Victorian psycho. We follow our main character who is hired as a governess for a rich family in like 1800 something, and she is psychotic. There's something wrong with her. You are following her stream of consciousness day to day as she both subtly and both obviously is messed up. What I found to be very interesting about this book was there's this balance of subtleties where a very off-the-wall, out-of-pocket sentence will be smashed in between 2 very mundane ones and you could easily just miss it. But then also very obvious moments of not good behavior, along with some of the conversation of misogyny in this book as well. I don't know. I thought it was very fun. It was a fun time. There's a lot of comedic relief in this as well. Very tongue-in-cheek at times. But because of the length of it and the way that you could just read straight through this and not really pick up much, it just felt a little too fast for me. I like a little bit of a deeper character study. So I gave it 4 stars. I do think it was a fun, entertaining time. And if you want a period piece following an unhinged woman, I think that this is a good one for that. And you don't mind kind of like a tongue-in-cheek approach as well. I thought it was a good, entertaining time, but I also don't think that it really stands out for me, especially over time. I don't think it will really stand out for me because it just didn't go super, super deep as I personally prefer books to go. So still had a fun time. I gave it 4 stars. Next was another DNF, and I DNF'd My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell. I DNF'd this not because I think it's a bad book, but it's just a type of book that I don't want to read anymore. In the vlog, I talk about how when I was probably in high school, I would have loved this book. I loved a contemporary story about an abused girl, but that is just not the type of story I want to read anymore. This is not the type of POV I want to live through anymore. We are following our main character, Vanessa, who was groomed by a teacher when she was 15. We follow her during that time period, and it jumps to her in her 30s, and she's still kind of dealing with it, but not necessarily dealing with it in the way you expect, at least up to the point that I read up to. I read till page 100, but she still very much has this teacher in her life and stuff like that. So yeah, I just didn't really want to read this because I found I wasn't going to get anything out of it. I wasn't going to get entertainment. I wasn't going to get a lesson. I wasn't going to get a new perspective. I just wasn't going to get anything out of this other than feeling uncomfortable and sad and scared for my future daughter. So I decided to DNF this. It's just not a story I want to read anymore. Then I read I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Hartman. This is a book that is sold as kind of like a literary dystopian where we are following a group of women who are locked in this underground bunker and one day they get out. And I'm just going to leave it at that. It is definitely a very literary work, and I found it to be very, very interesting and very thought-provoking. It wasn't a 5-star for me. I don't think that I latched on to everything of the story the way a lot of other people seem to. There were certain aspects that I just could have done without, but I felt like the perspective of our character was so interesting because our character is actually quite young compared to the rest of the women that are in this bunker. She pretty much was almost raised in this bunker. She has no memory of life before the bunker, and all of the women around her do. So she really is this very kind of alien-esque character. So the way she sees things and the way she grapples with things, I just found to be so interesting because it's just from such a naive, sterilized, desocialized perspective. So it's very much almost like an alien looking onto humanity, and there's a lot of questions on what it means to be a human, what makes humanity, and I just thought it was, again, very thought-provoking. I think that this is a story that I enjoy more so in having conversations about it rather than the book itself. It's not a very plot-heavy story or anything like that. It's overall very bleak, and very slow and very just not in your face necessarily. But again, it just brings up a lot of conversations that I think creates a very interesting discussion to be had surrounding what this book brings up. And yeah, I enjoyed it for what it was. And I think it would make a very good book to read with people, because I think, again, it does rely a little bit on that reflection and that discussion to be had to more so appreciate the story for what it was doing. And it's not really a fun, entertaining read while you're reading it. So you kind of need to get more out of it than it technically provides you. Like, you have to do some of the work, you know, to get some more out of this book. But I enjoyed it, thought it was good, 4 stars. And lastly, we have Children of Blood and Bone by Tomi Adeyemi. This is a fantasy book where we follow our main character, Zaylee, and her mother are magic. And one day the magic of this world goes away, and in the midst of that, the king decides to raid a bunch of villages that have diviners, which are people with magic abilities. And because of this, as a result of it, her mother is murdered. Very early on in the book, our main character ends up running into another main character of ours called Amari, and she is the princess of said king, and she has pretty much accidentally partially released magic, and they decide to go on a journey to fully release magic. And in the midst of this, Amari's brother Anan, who is the son of the king and the commander, I guess, of their army, is also chasing them to catch them, to stop them. So this book is very much about their journey of trying to unleash magic, going to places they gotta go to, getting items they have to get, yada yada. And yeah, I thought that this was fine. I think it was well written. I think the characters were dimensional. I liked their individual motivations and their individual internal conflicts, but there was just something about the story that I wasn't latching on to, and I think it just came down to personal taste. I didn't really connect to any of the characters despite them being well done. I do think that the magic was cool, but at the same time, it didn't hold my attention enough. And then there was also this side plot romance that I could have totally done without. And I did listen to the audiobook, and I think that the audiobook is amazing. And I think that the audiobook made it a much more better experience for me. So I ended up giving it 3.5 stars, and I feel like because of the narrator, I gave it higher rating and because the writing is good, so I gave it like a higher rating. But if it was really truly down to just my entertainment of the book and my enjoyment of the book, it'd probably be a little bit more of a 3, but I did officially give it 3.5. I think it had some good stuff in it, but I'm also not going to continue on with the rest of the series because I just don't feel attached to it at this point, and I have a lot of other series I would rather get to that I'm much more emotionally invested in. So yeah, I am excited to see the movie though. I think that the movie is going to be really cool. I think for me, because this is a very, very plot heavy, action heavy book, and again, that's just like not really my reading taste necessarily. I like characters more than plot, so yeah, it just like wasn't really for me. But because of how actiony it was and how plot heavy it was, I think it's going to be a really, really cool movie. And I really can't wait to watch the movie. So that was it. That was everything that I have read up to this point of this year for the first quarter of 2025. If you've read any of these books, let me know what you thought of them in the comments down below. If you made it to this point and I have nothing else to say but want to let me know you were here, leave me any type of spring emoji in the comments down below since we are heading into the spring season. As always, thank you so much for spending some of your time with me while I sit down and talk about books. If you haven't yet, please give the video a like, subscribe for future content, turn on the bell notification, all the fun YouTube things that help your girl out, and I will catch you guys in the next video. Bye!